Welcome to the 30-minute hour. It's the personal development podcast for the seven-figure entrepreneur who's looking to level up and become unstoppable. I'm your host, Eric Twiggs, your procrastination prevention partner. Joining me as always, you know him as the super CEO, the business strategist extraordinaire, and all-around good guy, Ted Fells.
Happy Monday, everyone.
It is indeed a happy Monday. And I just really think our listeners and watchers, they're going to get a lot of good information, and they're going to get just a unique perspective on marketing that I'm sure they've never heard before. So today, Ted, I know you're on the edge of your seat waiting to hear this. The five marketing lessons from the ledge of death. That's what we're going to talk about today. And I know you're like, from the ledge of death. What in the world are they talking about? Well, stay tuned, and we'll clarify that. It'll all make perfect sense here in a little while. Trust me, take my word for it. But know that this is not your everyday podcast.
It's not.
It's not,
Yeah,
Ted.
it's not. We do
It's
it a little
not.
different. We do it a little different here. I mean, if they don't know by now, we do it a
That's
little
right.
different.
We do things a little differently here on the 30-minute hour. We didn't even properly prepare Craig for what he
That's
was
all
getting
right.
himself into.
We will take it as it comes.
Take it as it comes. So definitely you can listen to us in addition to YouTube and Facebook by going to the 30-minute hour, typing that in the search bar. You can go to Apple Podcasts and Spotify and listen on your favorite podcasting platform where we've got over 1.2 million total downloads. So definitely fasten your seatbelt for today. You're in for a treat. Again, we're going to talk about the five marketing lessons from the ledge of death. And our guest, back in August of 2021, he began 3 months in the hospital and 6 weeks in a coma where he nearly died.
Mm.
And it was during that time that uh, his team ran without him. And he shares these lessons from the ledge of death on, on how you can apply certain things that are related to marketing to life. So there's going to be marketing strategies, but there's also strategies that can apply to success in everyday life. And I can just when you have a near death experience, it definitely changes how you move. It definitely changes your sense of urgency. I'm sure you don't sweat the small stuff. We'll get into all of that with him. But he's a U.S. Marine turned electrical engineer, mobile phone designer, turned marketer, and multi best-selling author. So please join me in welcoming to the 30-minute hour, Craig Andrews.
Hey, guys, it's great to be here. Been looking forward to this. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. I've been looking forward to this as well. I remember I was talking to you when we kind of had our pre-interview, and you were telling me, and I was just like, my jaw was on the floor with some of the things you were telling me. And yeah, I've been looking forward to this as well. So let's get right to it. So you spent the 3 months in the hospital and 6 weeks in a coma where you nearly died. So please share with our audience what happened and how it shaped you into who you are right now.
Yeah, so in 2021, there was this thing going around. Some called it COVID. And less than 1% of people that got COVID went into the hospital. And usually those were people that had other medical complications, other things going on. Maybe they were diabetic or something like that. And for some weird reason, I was in really good health, but I ended up in that 1%. And then a smaller percentage of those that went in the hospital, they put on the ventilator. With the Delta variant of COVID, which is what I had, close to 100% of the people they put on the ventilator died.
Mm.
And because that is what happened, they told my wife from the first day they put me on the ventilator that that's what was going to happen to me. They even had her meeting with hospice to plan the day they'd pull the plug. And they gave her no hope whatsoever.
Wow.
But she, the other thing they were doing is they weren't allowing family in the hospital. And my wife said, "Oh, no, no, that's not the way it's going to go." And she said, "If he's going to die, he's not going to die alone. I'm coming in to see him." And so they worked out a deal. They gave her an hour a day, and she came in. And for an hour, she would sing to me and she'd pray over me and she'd say words of encouragement. And I can tell you, I heard her. And I've actually repeated back to her word for word things that she said to me when I was in my coma. And
Wow.
I was the first one to leave that ICU alive.
Whew. Oh man. So how does going through an experience like that, like how did that change you? Like how would you say that you're different now than you were before all of this happened?
Some ways I get fatigued easier than I used to. My lungs aren't quite back to where they used to be, and that kind of ripples down to a number of things. And that's frustrating. But from another angle, when you nearly die, you start realizing the things that can't kill you. It's easy to live life in fear, and it's easy to make decisions based on fear. And when you feel like you've been given an extended lease on life, it's a little easier to make fewer decisions out of fear. And that's exciting. And it's interesting meeting different people that as they're going through problems and you realize, hey, you know what? The problem you have is a lot smaller. It feels big to you, but it's a lot smaller than you realize. And I don't know. It's in many ways, it's been really good. It's reinvigorated my relationship with my wife. It's probably the single best thing that ever happened to our relationship. Because when you're going through, when you're married, we just have this habit. We pick on the stupid stuff. We pick stupid fights, and you go through something like that, and you realize some of that stuff just doesn't matter.
Yeah, I can see how that would definitely shift your perspective as far as what's a big deal and what's not and what's really important. Yeah, I mean that's truly inspiring. So the other piece of this, so your team just ran the company the entire time you were going through this.
Yeah.
Talk about that. I mean, because that in and of itself would be a big deal for most business owners, right? If you
Yep.
step away, most of the time, the team is in shambles and everybody's scrambling, figuring out what to do. But that wasn't the case for you. Talk about that.
Yeah. So when I went in the hospital August 10th, 2021, and for 11 days, I'm sitting there with my phone and giving instructions to my team. And on the 12th day, actually late in the day on the 11th day, they shot me full of morphine. Still trying to figure out why they did that. But it was a few hours later, they called my wife asking for permission to put me on the ventilator because I was not responsive, which may have had something to do with the morphine. But from that point on, I went into a 6-week coma. And here's what's really interesting. My wife, of course, let my team know right away. And they, like my wife, she told them he's not going to make it. And so they jumped to and they started running the business like it was their own. But not because they were afraid of what I would do when I came back, because they didn't think I was coming back. They thought I was a goner. And not only that, there were freelancers that reached out to my team and offered to do whatever was necessary as long as I was in the hospital. And so for me, I'm missing all this. I'm in a coma for 6 weeks. When I wake up, your brains are a little bit scrambled, or at least mine were scrambled for a couple weeks after I woke up. And so it was about 8 weeks, a full 2 months after I went in the coma, that my wife started filling me in on, what had been happening. And when I learned what they did, when I learned what my, wife had to face, I was just incredibly sad for her, the decisions that she had to make alone. But then when I heard what my team did, I couldn't have been more proud of them. Just amazing how they stepped up. And it was probably another week or two later that I made my first business decision. So I went more than 2 months without making any single decisions in the business. And so for anybody that has employees or has a team, one of the biggest pains I know is, I hear owners and managers talking about how their team can't make decisions without them. Well, I made no business decisions in my business for over 2 months. And that's pretty awesome that they stepped up and did it.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of lessons here. Like, I mean, all the more reason to really empower people. Yeah, because I mean, you just never know. Maybe you're not going to be in a coma, but you just never know what can happen where people are going to need to be able to run with the business in your absence. And I think the fact that your team was able to make all these great decisions, I'm sure they probably made some great decisions that you wouldn't have thought they would have made, right?
Well, and that's such an important point. If you're an owner, you started what you're doing because you had a strong idea about how things should be done. And it's easy to fall into this belief that your way is the right way. Doggone if your team, when given the chance, doesn't teach you something every now and then. And, team goes off and does something where you realize, what, that was a really smart way of doing that. I wish I'd figured that out sooner. And so it's really good for them. It gives them an opportunity, to step up and make some of these decisions. You learn a lot. I would say this: you learn a lot about people, and this is broader than just business. I learned a lot about some, a few people in the process, and it's a unique moment. Coming close to death is a unique moment where you really learn who your friends are and who your friends aren't.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, here's something. Let me share this. So I go in the hospital August 10th. They put me on the ventilator August 22nd. Tell my wife that I'm going to die. My wife tells, she was journaling on something called Caring Bridge as a way of updating friends and family. So she told the world, they're saying Craig's not going to make it. August 29th and August 30th, I got a text message, one each day from two different people. And these are both people that had known me long time. And they also knew that I was in a coma. They also knew I wasn't going to be able to check my text messages. And these text messages were just some of the, you read them and they were like powerful. They're, one told me, that I had been a better friend than he ever deserved. And, and just these gushing text messages. And what's interesting is, since I haven't died, these people have been a little bit scarce. These two people. And so you look back at that and you're like, who did you think you were sending that text message to? And who were you sending it for?
Mm-hmm.
They knew I was in a coma. They weren't sending it to me. So who are they sending the text message for? And so as we live through life, my interpretation on this is both of these people had regrets and they were trying to work through their regrets.
Yeah.
Well, maybe the better way of living life is to live a life full of regrets.
Yeah. That's interesting. So we feel like they just had certain regrets, but now that you made it on the other side, it's kind of back to business as usual.
Yeah. Yep.
Huh.
Yeah.
Or you felt they were trying to Just get that off their conscience, maybe.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
It's that's one of the interesting things in life is rarely, like when my dad died, he he was we first found out at the University of Maryland Hospital right in Baltimore, around the corner from you guys, that he was going to die of brain cancer. And in that meeting, I knew, they didn't say, but I was listening. I was like, I think he has 9 months to live. And sure enough, 9 months later, he died.
Hmm.
But I had 9 months to communicate the things that I wanted to make sure he heard. We don't always get that kind of a warning. And so I think these were people that wish they had said some things before I was almost out the door.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I just think there's so many, and your story is an example of this. You just never know. And tomorrow's not promised, and you don't want to be walking around with these regrets, right?
No, deal with it
Yeah.
today. If you got
Deal
a
with it
broken
today.
relationship, go deal with it.
Exactly. Exactly. Man, yeah, this is just powerful. And I have one more question on this, and we'll move on to the business applications and all that. I'm just curious though. Were there moments where you believed the doctors, where you were saying, you know what? Yeah, this is it. I need to prepare for what the doctors are saying. Did you actually believe that you weren't going to pull through?
No. So I viewed, so the challenge was my oxygen levels were low. They had me on 30 liters of oxygen. And for those that don't know levels, that's a lot. When you see somebody walking around with one of these little bags and a little oxygen going into their nose, they're usually on like 2 liters of oxygen, maybe 4. 30 liters of oxygen is just insane. And while I was in the hospital, I knew my job was to keep my oxygen above 86%. And when it would start dropping, there were different positions I could put my body in and it would increase the oxygen and I could do different exercises. And I viewed my job as to keep my oxygen above 86% until COVID passed. And I was committed to doing that. And I was working hard at that until on the evening of August 21st, they say, hey, we're going to give you something that's going to help you sleep. And I wish they had told me it was going to be an armful of morphine, because I would have said no, because they had already given me morphine. And I mean, there's actually a text message I sent to my wife a few days earlier. I said, they gave me morphine today. Bad plan. I had to spend the morning on my stomach. So your lungs are in the back of your chest cavity. And when you lay on your stomach, you get more oxygen to your lungs. And when they gave me morphine, well, what's morphine do? It makes you fall asleep, or at least makes me fall asleep. When you fall asleep, you don't breathe as deeply. When you don't breathe as deeply, your oxygen levels drop. And so the only way I could keep my oxygen levels up was to lay on my stomach, which was uncomfortable because I had a whole apparatus on my face and I had electrodes on my chest. And so I didn't want an armful of morphine on August 21st. And so no, I felt like I was going to hang in there. I was strong. I had the fight in me. I was going to keep up the work until COVID passed through.
Because it's interesting. That's one thing that's consistent with these stories that I hear from people who have these kind of near-death experiences where the doctor is telling them that they're not going to make it and they make it. That the one consistency is in their mind. They're always thinking, "No, I'm going to make it."
Yeah.
There's a fight, like you said, and I think that's significant. And I think even if you look at business challenges, I think the people that make it on the other side of business challenges, same thing. There's a certain level of fight. And Ted, I'm sure. I mean, Ted has had his IT company for 27 years, and I'm sure there were some shaky moments, but he's got a certain fight about him. And I think that's one of the lessons from this episode. I think you can't stop fighting. And Ted, please chime in from a business perspective on the need for that fighting mentality.
Oh man, I mean yeah. I mean you're always fighting when you're an entrepreneur, right? I mean, customers, you're fighting to keep your customers, you're fighting to get the best employees, you're fighting to keep them, right? You gotta keep people motivated. Your finances. I mean, you just got so many things, and then you add in, the external factors that happen, like COVID situation that you have to be able to adapt to, right? I just, just every situation in business for me, I always look at it. I always have this ASC approach. I have to assess it, strategize, and then execute. Like it's constantly there. Like no matter what, I'm assessing something, I'm strategizing, then executing. But I will say it's never a dull moment. It's always a challenge. It's always, no 2 days are the same. But yeah.
Well, and I was talking to somebody earlier today, and he's hit a little bit of a crisis in his business. And for him, he's terrified, which I get. I get that he's terrified, but I'm looking at it through another set of lens. And I told him, I said, I think this could be a defining moment in your business. He's dependent upon 2 channels driving all of his revenue. And what happened, he's got some inventory built up that he has to get rid of. And I was like, this is a great opportunity to build a relationship with new channels. Use this excess inventory, not as a liability, but as an asset. Figure out some way to go solve a problem for them with this inventory, put together an irresistible offer. And on the other side of this, you could have 2 to 3 times the number of channels you're selling your product through. But it takes I think the hard times are necessary. I can tell you in my life, whether it's my fight with COVID or challenges I've run into in my business, I learn most from the hard times. My business becomes stronger in the hard times, not weaker.
Yeah. Totally agree. Totally agree. So let's talk more about the business. So you're the founder and CEO of Allies for Me. So who is your ideal client, and how specifically do you help them?
Yeah, so we're fractional chief marketing officer. We help people with their growth. And our clients, I found that they have a few traits. They have a high ticket service. They have a long sales cycle that requires a high level of trust. And when we see that combo, we know that we have a formula that helps them close more deals, helps them close them faster, and helps them close them at higher prices. And then there's 2 other things that when we see it, we get extra excited. If it's a complex service, we love those because we love taking the complex and simplifying it. And if it's an undifferentiated market, so if there's a lot of people that look similarly to you, we love that because let me give you an example. So I know up there you have a big personal injury firm called Science and Kirk.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you have a phone, you have a lawyer, right? So my sister-in-law is actually used to deal with Harvey Kirk. She worked for one of the insurance companies, and she would do settlements with him. But the most personal injury attorneys, their marketing message is, we fight harder for you. And you look at their ads and it looks like somebody looks kind of angry, looks like somebody, put a burr in their saddle or something. And the message is, we fight harder. Well, that's undifferentiated. Guess what? Every other personal injury attorney is saying you work harder. And that means that everybody except for one of them is lying, because only one can be working harder or fighting harder. And here in Austin, we got this personal injury attorney. He spends the least amount on advertising, and I think he gets by far the biggest bang for his buck. He's got dreadlocks, and his billboards say, "Injured?" ? David Comey, the attorney that rocks. So he's a rock star. That's his ad. He's like the only personal injury attorney in Austin that's not sitting there saying that he's going to fight harder for you. And you remember who he is.
Yeah.
You remember his message. So when we see somebody that's not differentiated or they're in an undifferentiated field, we don't work with personal injury attorneys, but that's an example that I like because everybody gets it. But when we see an undifferentiated field, we get excited because what we're going to do is we're going to amplify things that you think are unimportant, and we're going to hang them out there. One that we did years ago, financial advisor, high trust, high ticket, long sales cycle, not very differentiated, complex, meets all of our criteria. And as we started learning about this guy, I was like, holy cow, I just struck gold. He used to be he graduated with a computer science degree. He didn't look like Bernie Madoff. He didn't dress like Bernie Madoff. He looked like a computer science major that figured out how to do investing. And then when I realized we'd really struck gold, I found out he used to be a big time gambler. When he was in college, he wanted to use his understanding of algorithms to win at Vegas. And he would spend his weekends in Vegas. He was based out of LA, and he would go to Vegas every weekend. And so that's what we amplified. And the impact was in 18 months, we tripled their revenue. Mm. And I can't say it on air, but their starting number was big. And we actually slightly more than tripled that.
Wow.
But the thing is, for anybody that's listening, is if you're in an undifferentiated field, the differentiator is you. Not that you fight harder or you're better than the other guy. It's the traits that you're ignoring, the things that make you interesting, that make people want to learn more about you. That's where your differentiation is.
Yeah, there's a quote where different is better than better.
Yeah. I've never heard that, but I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Because everybody's family owned and operated. It's the same old thing, right? Everybody, you almost want to look at everybody else's ads so you know what not to do.
Yeah. Well, exactly. And I run into this all the time. I have clients that say, we propose something, and they say, well, that's not how it's done in my industry. And I listen, and usually my next question is your goal to be average? Well, nobody's goal is to be average. They're like, well, of course not. I said, well, if you copy what everybody else is doing, mathematically, your limitation is average.
Right.
You will never be exceptional by copying what everybody else is doing.
Yeah, no, totally agree. Yeah, I think that's a huge takeaway right there. If you could really work to differentiate yourself, and you almost have to be counterintuitive. Like, find out what everybody else is doing and don't do that.
Yeah.
Try to, what's my unique quality. And a lot of times it's that thing that you think would disqualify you, right? Sometimes the thing you think that would disqualify you could be the thing that sets you apart.
You think it was easy getting these financial advisors to put on their website that their chief investment officer used to be a gambler? They were terrified.
Right.
They were scared. They told me, they said, Craig, we don't think you understand our customers.
Right. Yeah.
I understand their fear. I'm not mocking them. I understand that fear. And thankfully somebody said, Craig, do you have a way of testing this? And I thought about it for a second, and I said, yes, I do. And so we put together some tests. We showed them the results of the test, and they're like, wow, that's not what we expected. And so thankfully they were bold. And so I don't want to mock them. I want to give them credit. They did something enormously scary. And because they were willing to be bold and trust their crazy marketing guy who was turning their chief investment officer into a gambler, because they were willing to take that bold step, they were able to triple their income, their revenue in 3 months, or rather 18 months.
Yeah. Yeah, that's powerful. All right. So now, Craig, everybody's on the edge of their seat. Let's share the 5 marketing lessons that you learned from the ledge of death. Let's start with lesson number 1.
Trust is felt. Trust is felt. If you go around saying, you can trust me, guess what people aren't going to do? As soon as you say that, as soon as you hear those words leaving your mouth, as soon as you put those words on your website, you just hurt your trust. And so what I had doctors coming around saying, I'm a doctor, I got the degrees, I got the credentials, you can trust me. I can tell you the people I trusted the least in the hospital were the doctors. The second is trust is earned, and it's earned through experiences. You know, when we talk about the high ticket, the high trust, long sales cycles, if you want to shorten the sales cycles, you need a mechanism to accelerate trust building, and that mechanism is experience. We talk about it in a book that I published last year called Make Sales Magical. And it's about how to engineer an experience where you work on things quickly and it builds trust quickly. When you come into somebody's life, you come shoulder to shoulder with them and you solve a problem in their life, it causes a release of oxytocin, which is a bonding hormone that bonds baby to mother. And when you solve a problem in somebody's life, you have that bonding experience. Trust is earned. So that's the second thing. The third thing is you're sending messages when you don't know that you're sending them. We call them the unspoken language of sales. So while my wife when I was in my coma, my wife was singing to me, she was praying over me, and she was saying words of encouragement. She wasn't sure what was coming through, but messages made it through. The doctors at the same time were sending messages, but they were sending different messages. And when I woke up, I didn't trust them. So, but for us, when you're trying to close a deal, your body language gives you away. There's nothing you can do about it. So here's another lesson.
Let's stop there, because let's go back to that. So give us an example for the person who's listening of how somebody's body language can send the wrong message.
You know, I wish I could be so exact as to give it, but think about it. I mean, we've all been in these situations where you realize, oh, this person's trying to sell something to me. And it's in their tone. It's in, you know, maybe they're leaning forward a little bit. Maybe they're being a little bit aggressive. But your brain receives the message, this person's trying to sell. And what's the first thing you do? You put up your guard. We don't like to be sold. We don't like to be sold. We call these little, you know, remember I said we have these we create these experiences. We call them mini projects. We call them first-time offers. That's actually what we call them. And it's kind of what I call the dog catcher strategy. If you're selling, let's say you're selling $100,000 service. Well, the more you try to sell that $100,000 service, and the more your internal tension hinges on, I've got to sell this. I really need to sell this. Your body language starts giving you away. And so if you want to sell a $100,000 service, the best way is what I call the dog catcher strategy. You don't catch a dog by chasing after it. You catch a dog by running away from it. You ever notice that? You want to catch a dog, get the dog's attention and run as hard as you can in the opposite direction. That dog will chase you. And so these little mini projects, it's like, hey, I'm not going to sell you this expensive thing I have. I'm going to sell you this cheap thing. It's dirt cheap. It's stupidly cheap, and it's going to solve all these problems for you. Not all the problems, because you want them to buy your high ticket thing. And it seems weird. And the thing is, when you get the offer structured correctly, you have no need to sell. Your job is just present the offer. You just put it out there, kind of like you would put a chocolate on a plate and serve it to a guest. They don't want that chocolate. Well, they must not be the type of person that likes chocolate. Can't help them. And
The dog catcher strategy.
Dog catcher strategy. Yep. The
Go ahead.
So here's another one. We're all competing for attention. And you have to earn that attention. It's hard. So I was in the hospital during COVID. Everybody was overworked. They didn't have enough staff. Every bed in the hospital was filled. And one of the things and guess what? I had a disease that was killing people. And I needed the nurses to want to come into my room. Now think about that challenge. Hey, why don't you come on in my room? Let me breathe on you a little bit and give you the disease that's in the process of killing me. That's a tough sell.
Yeah.
Everybody's competing for attention. I knew the nurses were overworked. The way I tried to do was to be the patient they wanted to help the most. Well, if we go back to the example of, let's say, the personal injury attorneys, I'm going to fight harder for you. Everybody's out there with that message. You're competing for attention. You got him with something different that hits them in their heart, where they start rooting for you. They want to see you succeed because they see themselves in you. This isn't about you being the hero of the story. This is about you telling your story so they're the hero. They see themselves in the story.
So it kind of goes back to what you've been saying, as far as just being different and just having a different approach.
Yep, exactly. Now, here's a big lesson, the final lesson. I'm going to give you a little bit of a setup. We talked about this earlier. We've had, if you've been married, you've had a stupid fight with your spouse. If you've had a significant other, you've had a stupid fight with your significant other. I've got everybody beat. I have the dumbest argument ever with my wife. And it starts off like this. I said, Karen, I want to go home. Karen said, you can't walk. I said, I can too. I can walk. She's like, no, you can't. You're laying in a hospital bed. You can't lift your arms, can't lift your legs. You just woke up from a 6-week coma. You can't walk. And I kept arguing with her. I was like, that's not true. I've been up 4 or 5 times already. And when I told her that, I believed it. I believed it at the core of my heart that I'd been up. Turns out it was some things that happened in my dreams that made me believe that was true. But she kept trying to give me, tell me all the reasons I was wrong. I kept telling her all the reasons she was wrong. The argument ended. I believed she was wrong. She believed I was wrong. And that's the way we go. When we're working with customers, we see a customer coming our way and we see that broken belief system. We try to use facts and logic to prove that they're wrong. And so the facts were in my wife's favor. I was in a hospital bed. I couldn't lift my arms or legs. I wasn't even strong enough to press the nurse's call button at that point. Not only that, but I had a giant tube coming out of my throat that was tethered to a machine beside the bed. Every bit of evidence was that I was wrong. So the 5th lesson is we all have broken belief systems. And I had a broken belief system. My broken belief system said I could walk, said I was in a hospital with 2 stories. Some of the times I would walk, I would go up to a lounge on the 2nd floor and relax in a bed up there that I liked better than the bed I was in. Hospital I was in, by the way, was only a 1-story hospital at that time. But it was a broken belief system. And if my wife wasn't able to present enough facts in that situation to fix my broken belief system, then you're not going to change your customer's broken belief system. And it comes back to that place where you have to create an experience where you lead them. You lead them to the right answers. When they start receiving the right answers on their own, when they start realizing it on their own, that's a tightly held belief. You don't have to persuade them. As a matter of fact, nobody will be able to talk them out of it once that belief changes.
Yeah, I mean, I just think even if you look at just the political climate, no matter what you believe, I mean, I don't care Either, yeah, I'm not even saying one side or the other, just in general. People
Yeah.
are so stuck with whatever they believe that the facts and logic, I mean, that's just not going to do it. And definitely in a business sales situation, being able to appeal to the emotions. And we all have that experience where we have a car that's a little more expensive than we intended to buy because the salesperson understood that and got you thinking about how you look in the car and how, what are your friends going to say when they see you driving this car? And now you're explaining it that, oh, yeah, it's the gas mileage. No, it's not.
Yeah.
That's not why I bought the car. I bought the car because I was going to look good in front of the girls and da 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 da. But yeah, no, I think this is 100% accurate. So let's go back through this because Craig, we may have some people who joined us a little late. I want to make sure they get the 5 marketing lessons that you learned from the Ledge of Death. Number 1, you said that trust is felt. Number 2, you said trust is earned. Number 3, you said you're sending messages when you don't know that you're sending messages. You got to watch your body language. Number 4, you're competing for attention. So that's why it's important, again, get back to differentiation. And then number 5, we all have broken belief systems.
Yep. Absolutely.
All
And
right.
it's neat. Going through that, especially the broken belief systems, looking at how screwed up my beliefs were, how divorced from reality they were. It's humbling.
Yeah. But I think it's good to recognize that you're not getting past that wall of belief with just facts and logics and what makes sense. So
Yeah.
I think it's just good to be open to that. Now I know you get asked a lot of questions from various business people. What's one question you never get asked that you wish people would ask you?
I wish they would ask what's the secret to getting people to fall in love with my service or my products?
Hmm. Okay.
And the answer is we don't make decisions with our logical brain. We convince ourselves we do. Where you guys are, there's a whole bunch of engineers. You got all these mathematical types. I'm a mathematical type. I've got graduate degree in engineering, and we convince ourselves that we're logical beings. And the reality is 95% of our decisions are made in the back part of our brain. And it's not emotional. A lot of people misunderstand that. It's that our brain doesn't have the energy. Our body doesn't have the energy to carefully think through every single decision. Our brain's only about 2 to 4% of our body mass, but it consumes 20 to 25% of our energy. And so to be able to survive, our brain's adapted where it makes 95% of our decisions in split seconds. And when you ask somebody why they made that decision, they come up with some reason that they believe it at the core of their heart. So when you run an opinion survey, they'll tell you the reason they made that decision, and it's complete crap. They made it for a different reason that they don't even understand themselves. And as soon as you figure out how to market to the backside of the brain, how to basically reprogram that backside of the brain, you're going to see some major breakthroughs in your business.
And that's what you help people with, to market to the backside of the brain.
Yeah. And the thing that our financial advisor didn't understand was when we were putting in there that he used to be a gambler, that was actually targeted at the backside of the brain. And it gets a little complicated, but it's counterintuitive. But what we were doing was we were making him likable. We were making him human and approachable and making him interesting.
It's interesting. I saw something where they had somebody who he got in a car accident, and that area of the brain that controls like the emotions was damaged, and literally he struggled to make basic decisions.
Mm.
Like literally just couldn't make any decisions because of so it just shows you the impact that emotions really have on our decision making. And it's more than we think. We tend to make our decisions based off of emotions and not really logic. But go ahead, Craig.
Well, here's a real life example of that. There was some retail store that held a special one weekend. They positioned somebody at the front door, and that person at the front door asked everybody that came through the door, "How'd you hear about our special?" 35% of the people that walked through the front door said they heard about it through the TV ad. That company never ran a TV ad. They all believed they heard about it through the TV ad. They weren't lying. They weren't being lazy, but they heard about it somewhere else. But that was hitting the backside of their brain. But when they had to explain why they made the decision they made, the answer they came up with was TV ad, which never ran.
Powerful.
Yeah.
Powerful. See, this is why you need Craig Andrews in your life to help you to hit the backside of the brain and help you to differentiate, because we already said different is better than better. All right. Good. Now this, Craig, I know you got a lot of stuff to do, so I'm gonna cut this. We're gonna bring this to the home stretch because this is a topic I could talk about forever. And you've got a lot of great insights. I mean, some insights I've never heard presented this way. But we are getting to the final segment. Is called Write This Down. And this is where we each go around. We're going to give at least one takeaway from today's episode to help the people write down so they can level up. So, Craig, you're our guest of honor. What do the people need to write down?
If you have a high ticket service and you want to close more deals, quit selling the high ticket service, create an irresistible low ticket offer on the front end, and sell that instead. And you'll close more high ticket deals.
Write that down. All right. Ted?
Yeah, but the biggest takeaway for me is the whole discussion around trust, right? Like that's such a key thing, and it's, and it doesn't, like it takes some time to build that trust up, and I think once you're able to get a customer to trust you, right, then you don't have to really work that hard to. I mean, if we think about the word sell, like to sell someone, it just sounds a certain way. Like you don't really have to sell someone once they trust you, right? You just, you can just provide some information for them, and and they'll, because of the trust they have in you, they'll be, so you're not going to have to really do any hard selling, but it's really important. Even though, like when we're, in our homes,
Your mic's cutting in and out.
in our homes, when someone's providing a service, right, and if they're doing a great job and you trust them, I mean, you don't ever really go look for anyone else, even if someone's actually cheaper. You trust them, and they've done good work by you. So yeah, that trust is such a key area.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Trust is critical, and it's the key thing. And once you lose it, it's an uphill battle trying to get it back again. So my write this down piece comes from when you talked about, it was like your fifth point about how we all have broken belief systems, and really avoid trying to attack the belief system with logic, as opposed to really focusing on understanding the feeling and the emotions and some of the other things that tend to motivate people to make decisions. And I think because you'll just bang your head against the wall if you're just constantly trying to use logics, facts, figures. It's just like, I look at it like with sports debates, and there's certain people that, you look at basketball, they don't like LeBron James. And I don't care what stat, facts, figures, you're not changing their mind. It's just not happening.
Yeah.
So I think you have to really recognize that, especially when you're in a business situation or in a sales situation, that at the end of the day, we all have broken belief systems that we don't believe are broken deep down. We believe our view of the world is right. And I don't care what you say, whatever facts, we're going to make ourselves right. So
Yeah.
write that down. All right. This has been a fantastic episode, Craig. Thank you for sharing everything that you shared. What's the best way for people to get connected with you and get in contact with you?
So they can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I think last time I checked, if you Google Craig Andrews, the #1 search result is my LinkedIn page. You could also come to my website, which is allies4me.com. That's ALLIES, the 4 ME.com. It was funny. I heard you say something earlier. You said it in a classic Maryland accent. I used to say company's name is Allies for Me. And people down south, they're like, for what? For May? I'm like, no, me. Marylanders, of which I count myself, we chop off the end of that word. Nobody understands us. So it's allies4me.com.
All right. Allies4me.com. Me, M-E. There you go. Good stuff. Thank you, Craig Andrews, once again for dropping the boulders of nuggets that you shared with us today. And then, speaking of sharing, for those of you listening and watching, don't forget to share the show.
Share the show.
That's right.
Share the show.
Don't keep these 5 marketing lessons a secret. Just share it. Share it to everybody you know. Again, great episode. Don't forget that you can listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Don't forget to hit the subscribe or follow button on both of those platforms. That is our time for this week's episode of the 30-Minute Hour. Until next time, have a great one.